Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm so excited you're here today. In this series, we're diving into a 10-chapter story that's perfect for beginners, starting with the invitation at midnight and ending with the morning of renewal. As we follow Noah's mysterious journey, you'll sharpen your English listening and speaking skills with clear, simple dialogue. Each chapter of the story gives you new words to learn, chances to practice pronunciation, and confidence building. Speaking practice. So grab your headphones, relax, and get ready to light up your English journey, one chapter at a time. Chapter 1. The Invitation at Midnight. I am Noah Hunter. Tonight is my 12th birthday, but no one at home seems to care. I lie in my bed, staring at the ceiling fan. The room is dark, and the only sound is the ticking of the old clock on my dresser. Outside, a soft breeze rustles the curtains. I pull my blanket tighter around my shoulders and close my eyes, hoping my family will surprise me in the morning. At exactly 11:59 p.m., I feel a gentle tap on my window. My eyes snap open. 1 minute before midnight, my birthday begins. I sit up and listen. Tap, tap, tap. It sounds like someone is knocking, but when I look, I see only the street lamp glowing on the wet pavement below and the tops of the pine, trees swaying in the wind. I slip out of bed quietly so I will not wake my sister, Mia, or my parents. My slippers feel cool on the wooden floor. I creep to the window and lean over the sill. The street is empty. No cars, no people. Just the shadows of branches dancing in the lamplight. I blink twice. Maybe it is just a loose shutter or a branch brushing the glass. I smile, shaking my head and back away. I press my palm against the window. A single drop of rain rolls down the pane. Midnight arrives. The clock on my nightstand ticks from 11:59 to 12:00. My birthday has begun. I stand there for a moment, waiting for something. Laughter, music, maybe my family calling happy birthday. But there is only silence. I tiptoe back to my bed and slip under the covers. My heart feels empty. I tell myself, maybe they will remember soon. I shut my eyes and try to sleep. When the morning sun rises, I wake to a quiet house. The kitchen smells like burnt toast and coffee. I pull on my favorite t-shirt, bright blue with a rocket ship printed on the chest, and hurry downstairs. I want to see candles on a cake, colorful balloons, a smiling family. In the kitchen, I find my mother, Sarah, on a video call. Her eyes look tired. She waves at the screen and says, "Yes, the files are with the client." My father, David, sits at the table, scrolling on his phone and sipping coffee without looking up. My sister Mia rushes through, grabs a piece of toast, and dashes out the back door, muttering, "I'm late!" I stand near the table, hands clasped together. "Good morning," I say, trying to sound cheerful. My mother smiles briefly, then goes back to typing. My father nods without speaking. No candles, no cake, no birthday card. My chest feels tight. I clear my throat. Maybe there will be a surprise later, I tell myself. I sit down quietly and eat my toast. I pretend the day is just like any other, but inside, I feel small and forgotten. After breakfast, I decide to leave the house. I do not want to cry here. I slip on my sneakers and step outside. The air is fresh and cool. A few clouds drift across a pale blue sky. I walk down Maple Street, toward Elm Park, hands in my pockets. The grass is still wet from last night's rain. Children laugh by the swings. A cyclist pedals past. Everything seems normal, yet I feel different. By the old gazebo, I notice something new. A leather satchel lying on the ground. It looks too neat to be trash. I pick it up. The satchel is light but sturdy. I unzip it and find a camera inside. Not a modern camera, but an antique one, brass and oak with a small leather strap. It looks expensive, like something out of a history book. I lift the camera gently. It feels warm in my hands. I turn it on by pressing a small button. The viewfinder clicks open, and the light on the back screen flickers. There is already one photo stored, a picture of the park bench where I stand. I swallow. How did this get here? Who left it? I glance around. No one is watching. My heart beats faster. This could be a gift, a birthday surprise. I bring the camera up and focus on the gazebo. Click. Nothing happens. It is just a photo. But I feel a curious rush as I lower the camera. I slide my finger to delete the image. Click, delete. In that instant, a sharp wind blows, and the satchel nearly slips from my hand. I turn to look at the gazebo. It is gone. Gone. Without a trace. The wooden floor, the pillars, even the painted roof, it all vanished. In its place is only grass and muddy footprints. I blink in disbelief. My breathing speeds up. I hold the empty camera in trembling hands. I tuck the camera under my jacket and walk home, my mind racing with questions. What power did this strange device hold? Why did it take the gazebo? More importantly, what will it take next? Chapter 2. The First Test. I spent the rest of the morning in my room, sitting on the edge of my bed with the old camera clutched in my hands. My heart was still racing from the moment the gazebo disappeared. I turned the camera over, studying every scratch on its brass body, every crease in its leather strap. A dozen questions swirled in my mind. Who owned this camera? Why did it erase real things? And most terrifying of all, what if it erased people? I knew I couldn't stay inside all day. I needed to understand the camera's power for myself. With my fingers trembling, I slipped it into my jacket pocket and decided to test it again. This time, I would start small, something unimportant, something I could afford to lose. I left the house without telling anyone. In the hallway, I paused and glanced at the family photos hanging on the wall. Pictures of my parents at their wedding, my little sister blowing out birthday candles last year, and me at my first day of school. None of those memories felt the same now. I took a deep breath and walked outside. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across Maple Street. A cool breeze rustled the leaves on the sidewalk. I made my way back to Elm Park, my footsteps sounding loud on the pavement. Children were playing near the swings, but I ignored them. I focused on my plan. Find an object, photograph it, delete it, and watch what happened. Not far from the gazebo spot, I saw a rusty bicycle leaning against a fence. Its paint was chipped, the chain hung loose, and the tires were flat. No one rode it anymore. It looked abandoned. Perfect for my test. I paused a few feet away, my hands sweaty around the camera. I raised the camera to my eye and centered the bicycle in the frame. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Then, slowly, I pressed the shutter button. Click. The camera took the picture. The viewfinder flashed for a moment. I lowered the camera and looked at the screen. There it was. The rusty bicycle, leaning, just as I saw it. My finger hovered over the delete button. I told myself it was just a test. It would be okay. I pressed delete. Click. My breath caught in my chest. I swallowed hard, bracing myself. I lifted my head and looked at the fence. The bicycle was gone. No jumble of metal, no loose chain, nothing but empty grass and a few fallen leaves. I blinked and stepped forward. My shoes sank into the damp grass where the bicycle had leaned. I ran my hand along the fence. No scratch on the wood. The bike had vanished without a trace. My mind raced. It worked, I whispered. My voice trembled. I took a deep breath and turned in a slow circle, searching for the bicycle somewhere else. But there was nothing, just the park as it had been before, minus the bike. A group of kids ran past, chasing a soccer ball. One of them skidded to a stop near me. "Hey, did you see a blue bike here?" he asked, breathing hard. "I left it just here this morning." His voice was calm, curious, not angry. I don't know, I stammered. My face must have been pale. He shrugged and rejoined his friends, calling back, "Maybe I left it at home." I watched them go, then knelt to examine the grass. There was no sign of the bike, no indentations, no pieces of metal, not even a scuffed leaf. It was as though the bicycle had never existed. My heart pounded. I stuffed the camera back into my pocket and backed away slowly. I couldn't believe what I had done. I had erased something real, something someone cared about. The weight of the camera in my pocket felt heavier than ever. I left Elm Park and walked home in a daze. Every step felt unreal. I replayed the click of the shutter and the click of the delete button over and over in my mind. The power to make things disappear. It was both thrilling and terrifying. When I reached my front door, I hesitated. My mother was still on her video call in the kitchen. My father was reading the morning newspaper. My sister's bedroom door was closed. No one would suspect anything. But I couldn't bring myself to go straight inside. I sat on the front steps and wrapped my arms around my knees. The camera lay on the ground beside me. I stared at it, my reflection distorted in its small screen. "What have I done?" I whispered. I knew then that this camera was not a toy. It was dangerous, and I was the only person who knew its secret. If I stayed outside any longer, I might panic. I picked up the camera, slipped it into my backpack, and went inside as if nothing had happened. Upstairs in my room, I placed the camera gently on my desk. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line under the rules I had already started. Deleting a photo erases the real object completely. I stared at the words, my hand shaking. I didn't know who had owned the camera before me or why it had chosen to reveal itself on my birthday. But one thing was clear. I had to learn more, and I had to be careful. Because the next test might not be so harmless. Chapter 3. Unspoken Disappearances. I woke up the next morning still shaky from yesterday's test. The brass and oak camera lay on my desk, the spot where I had placed it overnight. Sunlight streamed through my curtains and danced across its worn surface. I reached out almost without thinking, as if the camera might vanish too, then remembered that deleting things was its power. I pulled back my hand and sat up. At breakfast, the kitchen was quiet. My mother, Sarah, tapped at her laptop. My father, David, read the newspaper without looking up. Mia, my sister, shoved peanut butter on her toast and hurried off. No one mentioned the gazebo. No one asked about the missing bicycle. It was as if nothing had happened. I pressed my lips together, listening to the scrape of a chair leg on the tile floor. I thought back to the rusty bicycle leaning against that fence, my finger pressing delete, the bike disappearing in an instant. I wondered if my parents even remembered I'd gone out. I forced myself to eat a few bites of cereal, then stood and said, "I'm going out for a walk," before anyone could question me. I grabbed my backpack, stashed the camera inside, and closed the door quietly behind me. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same. Neat lawns, flower beds in bloom, cars parked along the curb. Yet in my mind, everything felt changed. I walked back toward Elm Park, following the same route as yesterday. The bench by the playground was empty, the grass still damp with morning dew. A black cat slinked by, tail high, then paused to inspect me. I froze. My pulse pounded. Yesterday I had tested the camera's power on an object. Today I needed to be sure it would work on something living, something smaller and fragile, something I could forgive myself for erasing. The cat blinked at me, unimpressed, then crouched down to lick its paw. I raised the camera in trembling hands. My breath caught as I framed the cat in the viewfinder. I pressed the shutter button. Click. The cat lifted its head, quickly glancing around. I slid my finger over the delete control. Click. A sudden breeze rustled the leaves overhead. The cat's form wavered like heat haze. Then it vanished. I gasped and dropped the camera. My heart thundered. I looked at the empty spot in the grass. No fur, no footprints, no sign anything had been there. I knelt, tracing the ground with my fingers. It was undisturbed earth. My stomach twisted with guilt. I stood up and hurried away, not daring to look back. Questions tormented me as I walked home. How many lives had this camera stolen? Had someone innocent suffered before me? I bulleted a new rule in my notebook later that day. 5. Deleting living things erases them completely, without warning or choice. I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me. In class, I noticed empty desks again. Yesterday's bicycle victim hadn't returned. Today, the black cat's owner's yard was strangely quiet. No cat food bowl, no mewling at the fence. Even the neighborhood children no longer talked about the mysterious disappearance. Their conversation moved on, as though unimportant. At lunch, I sat alone under a tree in the schoolyard, the camera hidden in my backpack. I watched classmates laugh and share sandwiches. I felt as if I lived in a bubble of tragedy that no one else could see. My best friend Aria waved at me, but when I raised my hand, she shrugged and turned away, her mind already shifting to a new topic. That afternoon, I slipped away to the music room. The bell rang, and the hallway emptied. Inside, sunbeams streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of empty chairs and sheet music stands. I placed the camera on a piano bench and stared at it. Its smooth metal reflected the dusty gleam of the room. It was silent. Yet in its silence, I felt its terrible power. I opened my notebook and added another rule. 6. People forget faster than objects. Time erases their memories. I closed the notebook and held the camera with both hands. My fingers trembled. I thought of my family back home, carrying on as if nothing was wrong. I thought of the cat, and of the rusty bicycle, and of the empty gazebo. I realized that each disappearance created a small hole in reality, holes that my camera could widen if I was careless. I carefully packed the camera back into my backpack and left the music room. The hallway was deserted. I walked to the gym, where students played basketball, but even here something felt dull. No one noticed my slow, haunted pace. It was as though the world had built a wall between me and everyone else. By the time I walked home that evening, the sun had dipped low. The sky glowed pink and gold. I paused at my front gate, took out the camera, and looked at its dark lens. I knew I couldn't ignore its power. I promised myself I would learn its limits, and I would protect the people I cared about, whether they remembered or not. I closed the gate and stepped inside, determined. The world might forget, but I would not. Chapter 4. The Secret Archive. I hardly slept that night. My mind replayed each moment with the camera. The gazebo vanishing, the bicycle gone, the black cat erased. As dawn broke, I sat at my desk staring at the small brass and oak device. It rested there, so still and quiet, as if daring me to learn more. I knew I had to understand its full power and its history. Carefully, I lifted the camera and examined the underside. A tiny port hid behind a sliding metal cover. I remembered the thin cable that came with it when I found it. My heart thumped as I dug through my drawer and pulled out the cable. It looked like a relic from another era, thick, dark, with simple connectors on each end. I placed the camera on my desk and plugged one end into its port, the other into my laptop's USB slot. My computer sprang to life. A new folder appeared on the screen. Lost and Found. My breath caught. I clicked on it, and a list of image files scrolled into view. The first few were folders named Removed O1, Removed O2, Removed O3, and so on. I stared at the file names. I had never taken these photos. My hand shook as I double-clicked Removed IO1. The image loaded slowly. A man in a brown coat, standing on a busy street corner, feeding crumbs to sparrows. The picture looked ordinary, too ordinary. But the label under it read, "Deleted." I closed my eyes and took a steadying breath. I clicked, "Removed Zhuanzhu 2." A young woman laughing as she held a red balloon in a fountain spray. Again tagged, "Deleted." My stomach sank. This camera had erased people, real people, from the world. Their only trace was here, in this secret archive. I scrolled further. Each image showed someone doing something every day. An old woman, pushing a shopping cart, a boy walking his dog, a couple sharing ice cream on a bench, all labeled "Deleted" with numbers. I counted at least 50 files, maybe more. My head spun with questions. Who were these people? Where and when did they live? Why had someone erased them? My fingers moved to the keyboard almost without thinking. I copied the files into a new folder on my desktop called My Evidence. I needed to study these images to see if any familiar faces appeared. As I browsed, I looked for clues, street signs, building names, clothing styles. Some pictures had clear hints. A cafe sign saying Monroe's, a statue with an inscription, but none pointed to Maplewick, my hometown. Next, I clicked on one of the earliest files, Removed Dao 10. It showed a man in a business suit shaking hands with another man in front of a tall building. I paused, zoomed in, and read the marble letters carved above the door. Willow Bank and Trust. My heart pounded. My town's bank was called Maple Bank, not Willow Bank. This camera had come from somewhere else, maybe another world, or another time. I realized the camera's previous owner had traveled, taken pictures, and deleted people and places across many locations, maybe across entire countries. Each removed file was a record of an erasure, a life erased, and now that owner was gone. Maybe they had vanished too, just like their victims. I closed the folder and unplugged the camera. I felt a chill run down my spine. The camera sat on my desk, its lens dark and unreadable. I touched the leather strap gently, feeling the worn texture under my fingertips. The device seemed heavier now, burdened by the memories of all those erased lives. I opened my notebook. Beneath my existing rules, I wrote, "The camera's archive holds every erased image of objects, animals, and people. The camera has a history, far older and wider than Maplewick." My hand trembled as I wrote. I paused and stared at those rules. If I kept this camera, I would carry its burden and its responsibility for the rest of my life. I didn't know if I could live with that weight. I closed my notebook and stood up. My legs felt weak. I walked to my bedroom window and looked out at the quiet street. The morning sun cast long shadows on the pavement. To everyone else, life continued as normal. Neighbors watering flowers, kids riding bikes, cars passing by. No one knew what the camera had done. No one would remember the disparities. I took a deep breath. I had seen the secret archive. I had learned the camera's true nature. Now, I had to decide what to do next. Keep it locked away? Destroy it? Or find someone, anyone, who could help me understand if there was a way to reverse the damage. The camera sat on my desk, silent and waiting. I touched its cool metal one more time. The secret archive had opened a door I could never close, and I knew my life would never be the same again. Chapter 5: Rules and Regrets. I pushed my chair back from the desk and stood up, my legs unsteady as I tried to shake off the dread in my chest. The camera sat in the middle of the desk, its lens dark and silent, like a watchful eye waiting for my next move. I knew that I had to set some limits, for my own safety and for everyone else's. So I opened my notebook to a fresh page and began to write. Take a photo. Nothing changes. Delete the photo. The object or living thing disappears. Only the photographer remembers. Deleting living creatures works just as it does with objects. Deleted things leave no trace behind. People forget more quickly than objects. The camera's archive stores every erased image. I paused and reread the list. Each rule felt heavier than the last, as if my pen had etched a chain around my wrist. I added one more. Regret is irreversible, even if the camera's effects can't be undone. My hands shook as I closed the notebook. I realized that every time I pressed delete, I had chosen to erase something real, from an empty gazebo to a rusty bicycle to a living cat. I had never stopped to think about the consequences for the owners, the neighbors, or the creatures themselves. And now, as I wrote these rules, I felt the full weight of responsibility. I sat back down and stared at the camera. The lens reflected the glow of my desk lamp. I remembered the first time I pressed delete, how my heart had raced with curiosity. Then came the mechanical click and nothing. A moment later, the gazebo was gone. I told myself I would stop after the bicycle, but stopping had been impossible. Each new disappearance tempted me, beckoning me to test the limits again. My mind replayed the moment with the stray cat. I had told myself that the cat was just an animal, that I wouldn't miss it. But I had missed it. I missed the soft meows, the way it brushed my hand with its head. And I missed the regret that flooded me afterward, a shame so deep I feared it might never leave. I looked around my room as if seeing it for the first time. My posters on the wall, my books on the shelf, my model rockets lined up on the windowsill, all things that still existed because I hadn't deleted them. I realized the true power of the camera wasn't just erasure, it was choice. With this device, I could decide what reality looked like. And that scared me more than any vanished object. I picked up the camera, feeling its cool weight in my hands. My finger hovered above the shutter. I had to test one more thing. Could I photograph something and choose not to delete, just to see if taking a picture alone might have an effect? Breathing deeply, I framed my desk lamp in the viewfinder and clicked the shutter. The image appeared on the tiny screen. I held my breath and did not press delete. I waited. Silence. The lamp remained unchanged. I exhaled and pressed the power button to turn the camera off. My heart settled a little. At least taking pictures alone was harmless. Yet, knowing how easy it was to cross that line from harmless to destructive made me feel like I was carrying a loaded weapon pointed at the very fabric of my world. I replaced the camera on the desk and leaned back in my chair. A soft knock on my bedroom door made me sit up straight. My mother's voice called, "Noah, dinner's ready." I tucked the camera under my arm and locked my notebook. Downstairs, the kitchen felt different. The smell of spaghetti and garlic. Bread, normally comforting, made my stomach twist with guilt. My family chatted around the table, unaware of the secret I carried. I took my seat and forced a small smile. I couldn't tell them. They wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, they couldn't help. As I ate in silence, I glanced at the closed drawer beneath my desk. Inside was the camera, waiting. I knew that if I didn't destroy it soon, I would be tempted again, and next time I might erase something I couldn't forgive myself for. After dinner, I returned to my room and scribbled one last rule. The only way to end this is to destroy the camera. I stared at the words until the room felt too small. I slipped on my jacket, grabbed the camera, and walked outside into the cool evening air. I didn't know where to go or how to break it, but I knew I couldn't wait. The world, or at least my version of it, depended on the choice I was about to make. Tonight, I would decide whether to keep holding power over existence or to let go and face the consequences of my regrets. Chapter 6. Trust Shattered. That morning, I woke with the weight of the camera heavy in my backpack. I told myself I wouldn't use it again. Rule 9 was clear: destroy it. But as I dressed for school, doubt crept in. What if someone else found it first? What if they erased something far worse than a bicycle or a cat? I shoved my hands into my pockets, feeling the camera's metal edges against my jacket. and tried to focus on breakfast. In the kitchen, my mother, Sarah, looked up from her notes. "Noah, are you feeling all right?" she asked. I swallowed and nodded, forcing a small smile. My father sipped his coffee, eyes on the newspaper. Mia rushed past, backpack slung over her shoulder. No one noticed the tension coiled in my shoulders. I grabbed a piece of toast and left without speaking. On the walk to Maplewick Middle School, every step felt uncertain. The sky was pale, neither bright nor gray, and the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual. I approached the old stone bridge that led to the school grounds and paused. The camera felt heavier than ever. I tucked it under my arm and walked on. When I arrived at homeroom, Aria was already there, waiting beside my desk. Her curly hair framed a worried expression. "Noah, you look awful," she whispered. I opened my mouth to lie, say I was tired or had a headache, but the words caught in my throat. I shook my head. "I'm fine," I murmured. She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't push. Instead, she slipped me a folded piece of paper. I opened it to find a simple drawing. 2 stick figures shaking hands, and above them the words, "Trust me." My heart clenched. I realized how much I needed someone to believe me, to share this burden. But as I looked up, I saw Mr. Bennett, our science teacher, scanning the room. His gaze landed on me, and I closed the paper quickly. He called out, "Noah, could you come assist me in the lab after class?" My palms went sweaty. Any moment now, I thought, someone will break the rules of ordinary life, and I'll be the one to explain why. The morning passed in a blur of lectures and quizzes. Every time my thoughts drifted to the camera, I felt a pang of fear. What if it malfunctioned? What if deleting something by accident erased someone important? At lunch, I tried to eat with Aria, but couldn't swallow more than a few bites. She reached out and touched my arm. "You can trust me," she said softly. For a moment, I considered telling her everything, but the look in her eyes, hope, worry, confusion, made me hesitate. If I shared this secret, would she believe me? Would she think I was lying, or worse? I pushed the thought away and nodded. "Thanks," I whispered. The afternoon dragged. In science class, I helped Mr. Bennett set up microscopes, my hands trembling slightly. He explained a demonstration on cell division, but I barely heard him. My mind was on the camera tucked in my backpack, waiting silently for my next move. After the final bell, I packed my bag and left the classroom first, making sure no one saw me reach inside. I stepped into the corridor, heart pounding. I had decided I would finally destroy the camera after school, away from prying eyes. But as I turned the corner, I nearly collided with Ethan, my older cousin, who sometimes tutored me in math. "Hey, Noah," he said, cheerful. "Want to walk home together?" He didn't know how welcome that offer was. I nodded, relief flooding me. "Sure," I said. As we left the school grounds, I let out a slow breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Ethan chattered about his day, but I only half listened. My mind raced. Where could I break the camera? Could I trust the old mill by the river? It was secluded, but the path would take us past Michael's yard. Michael, whose garden gnome I had nearly tested the camera on once. I stopped and looked at Ethan. "Can I tell you something strange?" I asked, voice low. He raised an eyebrow. "Of course," he said. I swallowed and reached into my pocket, pulling out the camera. His eyes widened. "What is that?" he asked. It's a camera," I said. "But not just any camera." My voice shook. I told him about the gazebo, the bicycle, the cat. I told him how I discovered the secret archive on my laptop. Ethan stood silent, arms crossed, staring at the battered brass body in my hand. When I finished, he didn't believe me right away. He laughed nervously and said, "This isn't funny, Noah." I shook my head. "I swear it's real. I can show you." I pressed the delete button on a stray leaf at our feet, and it vanished in an instant. The leaf shimmered, then disappeared. Ethan's face went pale. "No, that's impossible," he whispered. He stared at the empty ground. You did that?" I nodded. Ethan's shoulders slumped. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, voice cracking. I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid you'd think I was crazy. Afraid I couldn't control it." He took a step closer, eyes fixed on the camera. "We have to destroy it," he said. His voice was steady, determined. Together. Relief and terror washed through me. Relief that someone finally believed. Terror at the thought of what we had to do next. I nodded. Ethan slipped his hand into his backpack and pulled out a small rock. Too small, but the only thing he had. "It'll have to do," he said. We walked in silence to the old mill by the river. The wooden boards creaked under our feet. I set the camera on a flat stone near the water's edge. Ethan raised the rock and brought it down hard on the camera's lens. The glass shattered with a sharp crack. I grabbed the camera and watched as its buttons popped off, scattering in the dust. When it was nothing but twisted metal and fragments of glass, Ethan and I tied the pieces in my jacket and tossed them into the river. The water swallowed them, and the ripples faded. We stood on the banks, soaked in silence. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The burden of the camera's power was gone, but so too was the object that had tested my trust in everyone, most of all myself. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "Let's go home." As we walked back toward Maplewick, I realized that trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. But sharing my secret, letting someone in, had lifted a weight I couldn't carry alone. And now, with the camera destroyed, perhaps I could begin to rebuild that trust, starting with myself. Chapter 7. A Desperate Attempt. I woke before dawn, the sky still deep blue with only a hint of light along the horizon. My heart pounded as I dressed in quiet darkness. I'd spent all night turning over possibilities. If the camera could erase things forever, maybe it could also undo its own damage if I followed its rules in reverse. I had to try. I slipped the camera into my backpack and crept downstairs. The house was silent, the only sound my own breathing. I stepped outside and shut the door as softly as I could. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dew on grass. I started toward Elm Park, retracing my steps from the first day I found the camera. In the pale morning light, the empty spot where the gazebo once stood looked especially hollow. I paused at the gate. My plan was simple. I would photograph the spot, then refrain from deleting that photo. According to Rule 1, taking a picture alone did nothing. But I hoped the act of capturing the image might mark the missing gazebo in the camera's secret archive, letting me restore it by not deleting. It was a long shot, but after all I'd seen, nothing felt impossible. I walked across the wet grass to the exact spot. My shoes left faint prints in the dew. I knelt and pressed the shutter button, framing the open space where wooden pillars once rose. The camera clicked. I held my breath, then lowered it. I stared at the preview. An empty field of green, exactly as I saw it. No gazebo. But I refused to press delete. I stood and backed away slowly, waiting for something to happen. Seconds passed. A soft breeze stirred the grass. A bird chirped in the distance. The bench nearby was still bare. My stomach tightened. I focused on the camera screen, refreshing the image one more time. No change. My hope wavered, but I pressed myself to wait a full minute, twice as long as any other effect I'd seen. Nothing. The gazebo did not reappear. My legs felt weak. My breath shook. I realized the camera's power was one way. It could erase, but not restore. I took a shaky breath and lowered the camera. that experiment had failed. Yet even as disappointment washed over me, a darker thought emerged. If the camera could erase living things as easily as objects, maybe I could force a reversal, erase something to bring back something else. In other words, sacrifice one item to restore another. But that felt monstrous. I looked at the empty field, then at the camera in my hand. If I photographed myself and deleted the photo, would I vanish? Only to have someone else or something else reappear in my place. My stomach churned. This line of thinking terrified me more than any disappearance. I shook my head, stuffing the camera back into my backpack. Turning my back on the empty spot, I walked toward the swing set at the far end of the park. The swings were still gone, chains dangling from the frame like broken strings. I knelt and took a picture of the empty swing frame, again refusing to press delete. Nothing happened. I felt a fresh wave of grief for what I had lost. Innocence, certainty, even the simple joy of swinging high on a cool morning. As the sun rose fully, casting golden light across the park, I realized my desperate attempt had taught me two things. The camera would not undo its erasures, and thinking about sacrificing something living for the sake of recovery was wrong. My power to delete had come with a cost I could not pay. I needed another path. I gathered my courage and laid the camera carefully on a park bench. I sat beside it, hands folded in my lap, and stared at the battered brass body. I whispered to it, "I won't use you again." My voice trembled in the morning air. I closed my eyes, imagining the gazebo's pillars and swing chains restored, just as I had once imagined rescuing the bicycle or the cat. But it remained a dream. After a time, I stood and reached into my backpack. I lifted a folded piece of paper from my notebook, my list of rules and regrets. I placed it beside the camera as if to mark its crimes. 8 rules, each a warning, one desperate attempt, now etched in morning light, and a final vow to never press delete again. I turned and walked home, leaving the camera behind for a moment. I crossed the street, feeling lighter for having admitted defeat, even if defeat tasted bitter. The camera waited alone on the bench, silent and still, its power unspent. But I had learned its limits. I had tested both its erasing and its refusal to restore. As I reached my front gate, I realized that moving forward wouldn't be about unmaking the past. It would be about living with its consequences and finding my own way to fill the spaces the camera had erased. The world might forget, but I would remember. And in that memory, maybe there was a chance to rebuild more than any camera ever could. Chapter 8. Revelation at home. I walked through the front door just as the late afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting golden stripes on the floor. The camera tucked inside my jacket felt heavier than ever, as though every erased life pressed down on it. I stopped in the hallway and listened. In the kitchen, I could hear my mother humming softly while washing dishes. My father's chair scraped as he pushed back from the table, and I heard my sister Mia's laughter drifting up from her room. I took a deep breath. All day I had carried this secret alone. Every disappearance, the gazebo, the bicycle, the black cat, all weighed on me. I knew I couldn't keep it locked inside any longer. I had to tell someone. I headed into the kitchen and set the camera on the table so that it sat between us like an uninvited guest. My mother, Sarah, looked up from the sink. "Noah, is that your new camera?" she asked. Her voice was light, curious. I swallowed hard and shook my head. "No, Mom. Please sit down. I need to tell you something." Her brow furrowed as she dried her hands and pulled out a chair. I hesitated for a moment, searching her face for reassurance. My heart pounded. Then I began, my voice low. "I found this camera in the park. At first I thought it was a gift, but it isn't normal. When I take a picture and then delete it, the thing I photographed disappears from the world, forever." My mother's eyes widened. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. I pressed on. "I erased a gazebo where I first found it. Then I erased a bicycle. Then a cat." My voice cracked. My mother's expression shifted to concern, and she reached out to touch my arm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked gently. "I was scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you'd think I was crazy. Or worse, angry." I looked down at the table. I tested it, and I saw that it really happened. I saw the empty spots. And worse, I plugged it into my laptop and found hundreds of photos labeled deleted. People I never met, erased long ago. My mother inhaled sharply. She scooted her chair closer and put both hands on the table. "Show me." I took a shaky breath and lifted the camera's cable from my pocket. I guided her to my laptop and plugged it in. She watched in silence as the Lost and Found folder appeared, then double-clicked Removed Dowso 1. The photo of a man feeding sparrows on a street corner filled the screen. She frowned and clicked through a few more images. A girl with a red balloon, an old woman at a market stall. "This is impossible," she whispered. She placed a hand on her heart. "These people, They're all gone from the world? I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. Only I remember them. And I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop. She stood and wrapped her arms around me. I felt warmth and relief and shame all at once. Oh, Noah, she said softly. Thank you for telling me. She led me back to the kitchen table and sat me down. We'll figure this out together. I closed my eyes, relief flooding me. I told her about my experiments, the notebook rules I'd written, and my failed attempts to restore the gazebo. I confessed how I'd almost considered erasing something living to bring back something else, an idea that made me sick just to think about. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, she wiped her eyes with a tissue. You did what you thought you had to do, she said. But you're right. This camera is dangerous. We need to destroy it. I felt a new surge of hope and fear. Will it work? I asked, voice trembling. What if destroying it just releases its power in some other way? She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We'll find a way. Her confidence steadied me. But first, we need a plan, a safe place, and the right tools. You shouldn't try this alone. Just then, my father, David, wandered in carrying a mug of coffee. He set it down and looked from me to my mother. What's going on? He asked. My eye. Mother took a deep breath and explained. She showed him the photos on the laptop and described the camera's ability. He stared at the images, then rubbed his chin. This is beyond belief, he said quietly. But I trust you, Noah. And I trust your mother. If you say that camera is dangerous, then we'll deal with it together. My father's calm, steady presence made me feel safer than I had in days. Mia wandered in, curious. My mother decided to tell her, just enough to explain why we would be busy tonight. Mia's eyes widened, but she nodded and offered to help by keeping the house free of interruptions. By early evening, we had a plan. We would take the camera to the old mill by the river, where no one would see us. My father would bring a hammer and protective gloves. My mother would bring an old blanket to collect the pieces. Mia would keep the garage door open in case we needed a quick exit. As twilight deepened, we gathered our supplies. My heart pounded as I placed the camera in a small cloth bag. Together we walked to the garage. My father loaded a toolbox into the back of our car. My mother carried the blanket, and I held the bag with both hands, feeling its terrible weight. Before I climbed in, I turned back to the house. Its windows glowed warmly. For the first time in weeks, I felt connected, no longer alone with a monster of brass and glass. I looked at my family's faces and realized something important. Trust was fragile, but it could heal. And with their help, I would face whatever came next. We drove off toward the river, the camera sealed in its bag. In the passenger seat, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Goodbye." I didn't know if destroying the camera would fix everything, but I was ready to try. Together. Chapter 9. Destroy or be destroyed. We arrived at the old mill just as the sky shifted from amber to deep twilight. The river beside us hummed softly, carrying the day's last light downstream. My father parked the car on a gravel path half hidden by overgrown grass. The mill's weathered wooden boards creaked in the breeze, and the rusted metal roof glinted like a distant promise that this place would keep our secret safe. I clutched the cloth bag in my hands. Inside was the camera, each fragment a testament to every life it had erased. My mother set down the blanket and toolbox, then turned to me. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady. I exhaled, feeling my heartbeat echo in my ears. "I am," I said, though my voice trembled. My father slipped on heavy gloves and handed me a pair. "Protection," he explained, "in case anything leaks from it." I nodded, sliding my hands into the thick material. The gloves felt awkward, unnatural, like armor against the camera's power. Together, we stepped toward a flat stone slab near the riverbank, clear of debris and moss. I knelt and set the cloth bag down, careful not to jostle it. My mother unfolded the blanket beside it, creating a soft barrier between the camera and the cold ground. She tucked the edges under the bag, as though trying to soothe something dangerous. My father unfastened the bag, revealing the battered lens and twisted brass casing. For a moment, I thought I saw the camera's fragments glint in a knowing way, an unspoken challenge. My chest tightened. This was the moment of truth. Destroy it, or risk being destroyed by its secrets. My father picked up a hammer from the toolbox and handed it to me. Its handle was heavy and solid, forged for work and long use. I gripped it with both gloved hands, my fingers trembling around the cold metal. I lifted the hammer above my head and paused. The camera lay there, so small, so inert. Yet I had seen its power uproot objects, erase faces, and even steal memories. If I hesitated now, I risked letting fear win. I brought the hammer down in a single, decisive swing. Crack. The camera's lens shattered, spiderwebbing across its surface. A faint sound, like the snap of frozen glass, echoed in the still air. Fragments scattered across the blanket. I raised the hammer again and struck another blow, crunching the brass body. metal bent and splintered. Then again, until the camera was nothing more than shattered pieces and twisted wires. My mother reached forward with the blanket's edge and wrapped the fragments gently, as though handling broken porcelain. My father stood behind us, silent, watching the river's gentle flow. The moment felt oddly ritualistic, the camera's power, now contained in that ragged bundle, ready for its final disposal. We carried the blanket to the riverbank. Small pebbles crunched beneath our feet. Patting the edges of the bundle, my mother tied it tight with a strip of cloth. My father and I exchanged a look, uncertain whether to cast it in the water or bury it. In the end, we did both. My father lowered the bundle into the current. The water accepted it silently, swallowing our burden with barely a ripple. We watched until the cloth drifted downstream, where swirling eddies tugged it out of sight. Then, almost instinctively, we dug a shallow hole in the gravel and buried the last fragments, tiny shards that might one day emerge, but would no longer assemble. I pressed my hand against the earth, feeling the cool pulse of the river beneath. In that moment, I realized how much I had learned about power, regret, and responsibility. The camera had tested me, tempting me to erase the world at a whim. Now, as I reclaimed my place in the real world, I felt both relief and uncertainty. Had we truly neutralized its power, or had we only postponed its return? My mother placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's over," she said softly. Her words felt like a promise, but also a warning. Some choices could never be undone. My father wiped his brow and offered me a small, weary smile. "Let's go home," he said. As we walked back along the riverbank, the mill fading into dusk, behind us I felt lighter, freed from the camera's terrible grip. But I carried something new, a deeper understanding of consequences and the fragile thread that holds our world together. The camera was gone, but its lessons remained. That night, as I lay in my bed, I closed my eyes and pictured the girl with the red balloon, the old man feeding sparrows, the cat that once graced Elm Park. They lived again in my memory, and because I remembered, they existed. In the end, I realized that remembrance, unlike erasure, was the most powerful thing I possessed. And with that thought, I drifted into a peaceful sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Chapter 10. Morning of Renewal. I wake to the gentle glow of sunrise filtering through my curtains. For a moment, I lie still, savoring the quiet. Last night's rain has washed the world clean, and I can feel something different in the air. Lighter, hopeful. My heart is calm for the first time in weeks. I slip out of bed and walk to my window. Below, Maplewick streets glisten with raindrops, and a soft breeze stirs the new green leaves. I peer down at Elm Park. The gazebo stands proudly once more, its wooden pillars gleaming in the dawn light. Across the path, the swings hang ready, their chains gently swaying. My breath catches. Everything I erased has returned. I smile, tears pricking my eyes. Carefully, I pull back the sash and lean out. The air smells of fresh grass and wet earth. I call softly, "Hello, world." Even the birds seem to chirp louder, as if celebrating alongside me. Downstairs, the house is warm and bright. I open the door to the living room and see my mother arranging balloons by the couch, yellow, green, and sky blue. My sister, Mia, is struggling to tie a ribbon on a plate of cinnamon rolls. She giggles when a plume of powdered sugar scores her cheek. My father hums from the kitchen, placing a small cake with lit candles on the table. "Happy birthday, buddy," they chorus when I step in. Their smiles are genuine, and for the first time, I feel my own smile spread without constraint. My mother hugs me tightly. "Today's all about you," she says. "You deserve it." I sit at the table, heart full. I reach out and touch the gazebo-shaped candle topper on my cake, thinking of the first morning I woke alone, forgotten. Now, laughter fills the room. Mia drapes a party hat on my head, and my father holds up his phone to snap a picture. I look into the lens, remembering the camera I once held, and realizing that no photograph could capture this moment as clearly as I will remember it. After breakfast, I head outside, the soft earth cool beneath my sneakers. Across the street, Mr. Ellis, our next-door neighbor, has set up his folding chair by the sidewalk. He waves and points to something behind him. I turn and see the rusty bicycle I erased, newly repaired, its tires pumped, paint shining. He pedals it back and forth. "Saw this in the shed," he says with a wink. "Thought I'd take it for a spin." I laugh and thank him. A sense of wonder warms me. Even the small miracles, a gazebo rebuilt, swings restored, a bicycle returned, feel like a gift. Later, I stroll through the park and notice the black cat from before, now perched on the gazebo railing. It blinks at me as I approach and rubs against my leg. I reach down to scratch its head. It purrs, and I whisper, "Hello again?" The world feels kinder, as though healing itself. I sit on a bench and close my eyes. In my mind, I replay every rule I wrote. How the camera could erase, how forgetting was easy, and how regret was irreversible. But those rules belong to another life, one I no longer lead. Today, I choose to remember to keep alive the faces, the places, and the moments that matter. When I open my eyes, I spot Arya approaching with 2 ice cream cones. She hands me one, mint chocolate chip, and sits beside me. "You look peaceful," she says softly. I nod and take a bite. The cold sweetness tastes like new beginnings. We talk about everything and nothing. Summer plans, homework, the upcoming school play. There is no mention of the camera. We don't need to speak of it. Its lesson lingers in our smiles. I realize that sharing my secret was the turning point. When I let someone in, I found strength in trust. As the morning sunlight filters through the trees, I stand and stretch. I walk back home with Arya at my side. At my doorstep, I pause and turn to look at Maplewick one more time. Children chasing bubbles, dogs on leashes, neighbors tending gardens. The town hums with life, as though waking from a long dream. I step inside, ready for whatever comes next. My family greets me with cheers, and I join them at the table for a slice of cake. In their eyes, I see love and pride. And in my own heart, I carry a promise to never take the world's beauty for granted, to remember what was lost, and to cherish every ordinary moment that makes life extraordinary. This is my renewal, a morning of light, laughter, and the simple joy of being remembered. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.